Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining me today. It's Allan Laboucan with the Rocks and Stocks News Show. I recently got a new sponsor for my reports in Fokus Mining, and I'm really excited about the project because it's in Quebec, and it has a lot of parallels to what I saw in the early days of Osisko's Malartic project. Now that's saying a lot because Malartic ended up being the largest mine in Canada currently, and they were bought out. I've had a very good success in Quebec. I've only ever followed a couple companies in there. Two of those main ones were Osisko from very early days, and also Virginia with Andre Goumon's success. And so Quebec has treated me very well. And I think we've got a great Quebec story developing in Fokus Mining. So I'm glad to have Jean Rainville on at the show to talk about Fokus Mining. Thank you for joining us, Jean.
It's a real pleasure, Allan. Thanks very much for the invite.
Well, right away, I'm a big promoter of people doing their homework on companies, Jean. And, the way I do that is I go and look at news releases on the websites, I look at corporate presentations, and then I get on the phone with management, which I did with you. And what stood out to me on the corporate presentation is that it looks like you have 4 zones there that are shaping up to, if I'm not a mining engineer, but it looks like there could be a nice open pit there. And then you've got the Morris zone, which has a very high grade element to it. So those are the things that stood out to me, and I was really grateful for the time you took to talk to me on the phone because the quality of your assets really stood out. And that's why I advise people to get on the phone and talk to management. So I think that's a good starting point for us to get into your project, Jean.
Yeah, I think you're right. There's a potential here for some open pit mining in parts of this western portion of the property. We haven't done enough drilling yet to be able to confirm how much of that potential is really there, but we know for a fact that in the period 2009-2012, there was a report written on a part of it called the GP zone, where a open pit resource was estimated of about 260,000 ounces, and that was with very limited drilling at the time. About 14,000 meters were drilled in that program in this whole entire area. And we went back and drilled since about 40,000 meters in the last 2 years. So we're starting to understand what we're dealing with. But again, this is only a very small portion of the property.
Yeah, I think if I had to do a very preliminary drawing of a potential open pit shell, it looks like the top of Hendrick, GP, where you have the most drilling, RB, and Herd, which covers a strike of about 2,000 meters and is still open, could be the makings of a pit shell.
Yeah, well, some of it looks very promising, especially GP, RB, and going northeastern towards the Herd zone. We were shocked by the results to date of the RB zone that were released in March. We're still not quite sure what we have here at RB, but it's been a bit of a shocker because it's a brand new discovery. We made that discovery last year, brand new area. And we have another find with just one hole in it, about 700 meters east of it, with results almost as spectacular as in the RB zone. So we definitely want to continue to drill RB and going northeastern towards Herd in the coming months, and hopefully come up with a revised resource estimate with parts of it which will be including open pit mining situation. That's what we're hoping for.
Some of the highlights from RB are 115 meters of nearly a gram. And then Herd looks like it's got some expansion potential quite significant out there, because RB and Herd is where you have your least amount of drilling, but some very thick intersections of handsome grades for an open pit type target.
We are getting more and more the impression that RB is the same zone as the Hendrix zone, and it was caught by the arrival of GP in the middle of it. And it's a bit of a strange situation to see that GP, although it's very different geological setting, is also completely mineralized with gold. So it shows to us we're dealing with a large gold system with lots of gold in it, and that's why I want to continue to drill as much as we can the Ontario area of that western portion of the property, because it looks like it could host several million ounces of gold.
Well, that's another thing that really stepped off the page for me, was that there is widespread gold mineralization that's suggestive of a very powerful gold mineralizing system or systems.
It's been one of the few occasions in the 50 years I've been in the business where every hole you drill, there's gold in it.
That's a nice problem to have.
Well, it's not always economical, but it just shows you how large and how significant the whole system is. And it's just a matter of, with a little bit of luck here, to get some real interesting zones. I think I was happy with the initial results because we have those wide intercepts, as you pointed out, which could be sometimes even mining underground is a possibility here, using long hole mining methods at very low grade now if the intercepts are wide enough. So we haven't done enough work to confirm that it's doable at this point, but it's certainly, the results are encouraging enough that it's certainly worthwhile for us to continue. And the fact that we have now more zones closer to surface is also more than encouraging.
When you're talking about that underground bulk mining kind of scenario, that's deeper into the Hendrix zone, which is sort of underneath that near surface stuff.
That's correct. There's a layer of cobalt sediment covering part of the Hendrick, and we're been lucky enough that it doesn't continue on to the east. So our GP and RB are exposed at surface without this layer of sediments, and it doesn't exist as you go further northeast. So there's this potential of possibility of mineralization starting very close to surface in many areas.
Now, another thing that that stood out from I posted in when I wrote about you to welcome Fokus as a sponsor. I included that map you have showing Morris Hendrick, GP Herd, and another thing that stood out to me was on that Hendrick, lower Hendrick. I noticed that the gold mineralization all seems to be coming into zones going in the same direction, and it's right by the contact of two key rock packages. Did I get that right?
Yeah, that's why we are getting the impression that it is all like perhaps one big zone, except for GP, which comes in after the fact. It's a late intrusion, more in the volcanic than in the syenitic porphyry type of mineralization that you'll find at Hendrick, RB, and probably all the way to Herd. So yeah, it seems to be all one system, connected together with mineralization going into one direction.
So that certainly points towards the depth potential and the potential that there is a big source down there of where all this mineralization has come from. And that's over a pretty significant area of over 2 kilometers of widespread gold mineralization.
You don't know how anxious I am to get a possibility to go and drill underneath GP in this area. And
Yeah.
between those two major faults in making this GP and brought it to surface. And there seems to be this contact, those two faults here seem to play a major role in the area. And I suspect this is where the bonanza could very well be.
Wow.
But
Well,
it's, it's guessing again, but
little
given my
geological arm waving, but you certainly have the indicators there that your arm waving is not full of hopium.
well, it's such a large property. We have, with the help of ALS Gold Spot that we've been working with the last several months. It's now clear that we have like 3 major mineralized systems on the property, and we're only dealing at the present time with one of them.
Right. And do they feel that Morris is associated or something separate?
We don't really know at this point. We haven't enough work depth on this part of the property. We've only done some shallow drilling on Morris at this point because our initial program was to scatter the drilling between the different zones to go back to the 2019 20 program where they had done holes in different parts of this property. And so we tried to have a bit of a better understanding initially in the last couple of years to see what we were dealing with. And now I think Morris is still a bit of a unknown for us, but because of the exciting results on RB, I think we want to focus on RB in the coming months.
Morris has got my juices flowing. I'm a big high-grade gold junkie, and some of the highlights for it is that you've seen coarse gold at the Morris showings. Several assays are over 30 grams per ton, with a highlight hole of 59 grams over 6.2 meters with a subinterval of 285.93 grams over a meter. That's some pretty exciting and juicy numbers there, Jean.
Yeah, I agree. We haven't been able to find any significant lateral extensions. So it definitely when I have to do some deeper holes, and we were not quite ready yet just to do that. I wanted to explore the entire cyanitic complex in the area before we go underneath. Same as GP, by the way. GP, I think we go under 300 meters. We could have some very pleasant surprises. But again, I'm so thrilled by the results at RB that we want to have at least another 3,000 meters of diamond drilling to at least understand, because with the 12 holes we have at this point, we don't really have a good understanding of what we're dealing with.
You mentioned,
and the holes are shallow. Those holes are going to be very shallow.
Perfect. You mentioned Gold Spot, and that the work that they're doing really intrigues me, because before I got into the mining business, I was quite involved in the technology space. And Gold Spot is using big data and algorithms to use on the mining sector, which seems to be a a perfect sector to focus on, because mining, you do use a lot of big data. And can you tell us a little bit about what their work is coming up with?
Well, the real advantage that we have with our project, yes, there's lots of data because this whole area has been worked since about 1920. The first mining claims on this Galloway project were staked in 1924.
Wow.
So there's a lot of history, a lot of data available. Kerr Addison worked there when they had the Virginia town mine next to us, 15 kilometers to the west. A lot of prospectors, a lot of different companies and people have worked on this area over the decades. So we have geophysical, geochemical, short drill hole data, some stripping data. We have like tons of information, and we flew with a state-of-the-art airborne survey the entire property 2 years ago with drones. So this adds up. Again, more information. We have some of the core from predecessors drilling campaign. We have tons of information, so it was a perfect setup for ALS Gold Spot to take all that data and massage it, with their systems, artificial intelligence and whatnot, and help us determine what could be the best drilling targets and try to specifically prioritize our exploration programs.
Well, I'm excited to hear about that. Being a technology and mining guy, I love to hear about the merging of those two industries. Another thing that I spent a lot of my time with in the business is diamond exploration, and we had to deal with a lot of data in that business. And in Canada, we were sort of learning on the fly and needing to use a lot of new techniques. And so I got a lot of reasons to be excited about the work that ALS Gold Spot is doing for you guys.
Yeah, I think it was very valuable for us to go through the exercise, and I've got like hundreds of pages of material now to go through, their complete analysis. Unfortunately, I've been busy. I haven't had time to really digest all the information yet, but it's definitely going to be very useful for us in the future.
Now, before we started this interview, we were having a chat, and you mentioned something about the history, your history, and you've brought up the history of the project. But you mentioned that you actually worked on this as a student in geology.
Yes, exactly 50 years ago. It was my first project as a summer student for the Quebec government. We're doing an initial review of mapping, geophysics, geochemistry throughout the Cadillac Break west of Noranda, all the way to the Ontario border. And it was my first summer job. And this is when I decided to go into the mining business.
And so it's a full circle for you.
It sure is, because at my age, it's probably my last project.
Well, another thing I really like about Quebec is not only is it a great jurisdiction for exploration, mine development, and mining. The government Geological Survey, I think it is a fantastic at compiling a lot of data, real science-driven province. So these things combined make it for one of the best jurisdictions in the world for mineral exploration and mine development.
I agree 100%. we have again a lot of historical data, even from government data, and more specifically, what's been very useful to us in this initial phase of our exploration program is the fact that we have a complete LiDAR west of Noranda. The entire area was flown by the government for the topography, so I can tell you within a meter where every drill hole is.
And that also helps you see those structures that often give signals of where they're located by what's expressed at the surface.
It's a very useful tool. I mean, every other project I've been associated with in the last 20 years in Quebec, we've quickly, had the LiDAR done because it is very useful to identify all for structural geology, which is key for gold in particular. I think it's very good to have.
And you mentioned one of the most important structural breaks in Canada. So you're right in the right ballpark.
Yes, we're just north of the Cadillac Break, and there's a lot of offset faults. A lot of the mines, in fact, in the camp were found on offset faults to the main break. And so we're definitely are in the right area.
For the non-geologist out there, why this is so important is those big structures, they're deep cracks in the earth that allow the fluids that carry the gold to make their way up to surface. And then as they get close to surface, you get these secondary breaks or cracks in the earth. And that's where a lot of the fluid may start from deep in the above the upper mantle, making its way through these deep cracks, and then they spread out. Did I get that right, Jean?
That's correct, 100% right.
So you're in that right kind of environment in one of the most important structural corridors in Canada, if not the most.
I'm shocked by the discoveries that are still made in the camp. Just look at Wazamak east of us, where they have now a couple of million ounces. West of us, just across in Ontario, there's been another discovery with 7 million ounces in a private company. Malartic, the new project that used to be joint venture between Yamana and Agnico Eagle. They sunk a shaft now down to 1.4 kilometer in depth. And Agnico announced last week that they're going to sink a second shaft. It looks like they have, I don't know, probably 8, 10, 15 million ounces of gold.
So that's good that you brought that up, because the evolution, I remember the evolution of Osisko and Malartic very well, because I was fortunate enough to pick up on the story when they were in their early days of drilling. And now it's evolved from that open pit, by the way, that needed a town to be moved, and the locals were okay with that. And so they had this big open pit, and then now they've got the depth potential. And there again is a similarity to what you're looking at. You've got this big zone of near surface mineralization that's over a couple of kilometers, showing a big, powerful system. And then at Hendrick, it shows that it could be pointing deeper. So a lot of parallels there that are quite interesting to me.
Well, I certainly are in agreement to what you said. I'm not saying we're the next Cisco, but at least I think we got a chance to be in a situation a couple of years out where we have outlined a very significant source of mineralization, and I hope that we'll be able to finance our project to the extent where we can prove to the world that what we have here is of significance.
Well, I know it's humbling to say that parallel from a geological perspective, Jean, to you now where you are. But I saw how it evolved, and you know, I like what I see in Focus to evolve into something important.
You know, it's when you have resilience in that business, it makes a big difference. I had a mentor named Paul Penna, who founded like Nico Eagle way back. And I remember when Paul and his geologist, Mr. Habacek, took me to what is now the Laron mine.
Oh,
We were
wow.
they had a surface showing where they took a small bug sample, and it was like not much there, to tell you the truth. And then they started to drill underneath it. We raised $5 million back in the year, I think it was '84. And look at this thing today. It's still going after 35 years.
It's really the company maker for Agnico, isn't it?
That's correct.
Yeah. Wow. Um, and um, I I saw the same thing in the guys at Osisco, and in fact, I wrote about their resilience because all along the way, Jean, they had detractors. Well, was it going to be big enough? What about the grade? What about the town? What about financing it? And Sean Rusin and his team just kept on focused and driving it forward. And you know, it really emphasized something I learned a long time ago, that every project needs a champion and someone who sinks their teeth into it, doesn't give up. And it looks like you got one of those on your hands here, Jean.
Well, I'm determined to take it as far as I can, and you know, at least so far we made some significant progress just in the last 2 years, and we definitely have every intention to continue down that road.
Speaking of progress, what's in the ahead of us to progress to advance the project, Jean?
Well, as I was mentioning earlier, we want to do a, a drilling program, a shallow hole a drill program on RP, which consists of more or less 3,000 meters of drilling, really not much. So about 10 short holes to really understand what we got near surface at RB. So that's the next step. And then we're going to continue on towards the northeast, towards the herd showing, to see in the coming months what is the open pit potential in a particular area.
So you've got a bit of a interesting plan of how to get the money together to do that. Why don't you touch on that for us as well, Jean, before we close?
Well, there's many approaches, but of course, but we are shareholders in a company called Mosaic Minerals, which has got a very large land package for lithium in the James Bay area with some beautiful projects. Some are tie-on to very large, significant sources of lithium mineralization. They got over 50,000 acres, and they're going to start doing some field work this summer. We happen to have 10 million shares in this company because initially they were intending to be a base metal company. We had in focus a number of base metal projects, and we decided to create sort of a sub company with base metal projects. We vended our projects to Mosaic, so that's how we inherited 10 million shares in the company.
Well,
So we plan to go to dispose of some of those shares.
Well, speaking of lithium in Canada, it's really become more interesting of late because I think a lot of people are starting to realize that the same ages of rock and the same potential that Australia, which has now launched itself into the most important source of lithium in the world, are all in Canada as well, and in the James Bay lowlands specifically, and in Quebec. And so it's getting a lot of attention. And so it looks like Mosaic might be part of that party, if you will.
Well, I think it is the case. They have a very nice land position, and they have a good geological team. Actually, we share some of the people, that deal work with for both companies, and they're very experienced geologists. So I'm quite happy to see that they went into the lithium business last couple of months, and were able to acquire very rapidly a very significant, good quality land position in that James Bay sector.
So when would they start to do some drilling, Jean?
I don't really know yet. I haven't seen any uh, sort of plan for what is going to be the next summer program. I know there's going to be some field work, but I don't know how much drilling it would involve at this point.
Okay. So, and then there's another option that you have, which is you have a big chunk of warrants out there that might get exercised.
That's true. We have some very good shareholders who've been following us the last few years, some with some very large position, who continue to buy into every private placement we put together, and they all have warrants attached to them. And as we continue on, there is a strong possibility that some of these warrants might get exercised.
I know the group you're talking about. In fact, one of the key members of that, what I call the Quebec Mafia, um, he's the one who introduced me to you, Jean, and I'm very glad that he did. And I know from my experience with them that they almost operate like insiders when they get their teeth into something.
Well, they are more than shareholders. They play an active role, as you pointed out, in the sense that they will lead us to take some directions, like you should talk to so and so. They have a really interesting network of people, not only in Canada but also outside our country, and they now have large portfolios of mining stocks. They are exclusively in mining, by the way, which
Yeah.
I find amazing. It's very rare to find that today,
And it's
and
kind of a private network that's been
and
working
and
together for many years.
and they're doing extremely well. They have some real winners.
We'll have to say hello to JD and thank him for putting us together, Jean.
He's out fishing today, by the way.
I hope he catches another one, some more good fish. Was there anything you wanted to close on, Jean?
No, I just like to thank you very much for the nice report you put out on our little company, and I'm glad we're getting some interest from people like yourself. It's very important for us because sometimes we feel very lonely at what we do, and it's a long and tedious process. You need to be very disciplined, and that's what we're doing.
Well, Jean, I've been very blessed in my career to have great mentors in geology, geophysics, geochemistry, and also in corporate how to run companies. I include Andre Goumond as one of those people, and I've been fairly fortunate to be able to spot good things before the crowd does. And I think I've done that again with Fokus Mining.
Much appreciated, Allan.
Well, I look forward to our future interviews when you get the old truth machine cranking up there and doing some drilling for you.
Great. Thanks very much for your time again.
I'm going to close it off. Wait a couple minutes and we can have a chat at the other end. So
All right.
there you go, folks. Fokus Mining is focused, if you will, in Quebec, which is one of my favorite jurisdictions in the world. I really love the how open it is for mining, mineral exploration, development, and mining. It's a real science-based province where they've compiled tremendous amounts of data. And as John was saying, it's quite surprising that there's still projects out there in really important geological settings that have not had enough exploration. And I think that is quickly going to change for Fokus Mining, because I'm seeing some similarities there. Now it's early days, and I don't want to say it's the next Osisko Malartic, but a lot of the parallels I'm seeing are very similar. And I'm quite excited about this company that only has a $9 million valuation. Their stock symbol is FKM. And now that they're a sponsor, I'll be closely following all their developments and having future interviews with Jean. And so, as always, my shows are for information purposes only. It's important for you to speak with your financial advisors and do your homework. And this is a good place to start. And then go to their website, check out their news releases, and check out their corporate presentations, and give Jean a call. He loves to talk about his company and its project, and I invite you to do that homework as well, because I think it's very important. On that note, have a great day, and we will talk to you soon.